Thanks for joining us this week on CLT Blogs, A Healthier Charlotte, where we are going to try to make sense of technology and digital media and where they fit into healthcare. More than just social media and smartphones, digital technology is working wonders in chronic care management, preventive medicine, cutting-edge research, and more, and we'll try to cover some of that today. Joining me, let's meet our panel first. And we've got three people from the College of Health and Human Services at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, starting at the far end of the table, Dr. Michael Moore, the Interim Director of Academic Technologies at UNCC. Next to him is Dr. Reuben Howden, a professor in the Department of Kinesiology at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Next to him in the middle is Dr. Judy Cornelius, also at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and a professor in the School of Nursing. And finally, next to me, already on his smartphone, is Josh Oakhurst, the creative director of Skookum Digital Works. And Josh, I'll get to you last since you have some tweets to send.
I'm busy.
And plenty of 49ers on the panel today, so let's get to you guys first. Everybody, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
And a quick programming note for the folks who watch us every week. We're going to do it a little bit differently today, focusing on one individual for a couple minutes before we open it up to a whole panel discussion. So let's start with that. And Dr. Moore, I want to start with you and focus on you first because I think you're going to kind of set the table for us here. Informatics, when we talk about informatics and information technology, it's the simplest is the intersection of healthcare and computer science and information science, but a lot of people may not understand what that really encompasses. I mean, what do you do? What role do you play in supporting healthcare research, and how is this cutting edge?
So my role at the university is to support the research that our faculty do. So the research that Dr. Howden and Dr. Cornelius are going to talk about, we set up the technology infrastructure that support them in their research.
And I mean, how is this revolutionary? Because I have a feeling a lot of people will say, well, okay, that's common sense. But there's a lot going on in informatics. There's a lot going on specifically in the healthcare field. Any specific things out there right now where you see data being transferred in a way that is innovative?
Well, I think one way to sort of talk about the importance of health informatics is to talk. It's not just the technology. It's what the technology lets us do. It's new ways of communicating about the data, new ways of organizing the data and sharing the data. And that data might be electronic medical records. It might be trends in the region. It might be research data that we just found out off of a new research study. And the result is a clearer picture for decision makers to be able to take that data and make better decisions with it.
Well, and you mentioned electronic medical records, and I want to get to that in a second. But before we get there, I feel like there's a lot of examples of digital media and data being used in healthcare right now. A few months ago, a researcher at UCLA, you probably saw develop the microscope where you take your smartphone, if I can use yours, you take your smartphone, you put a microscope on it, you can transmit data anywhere in the world. Is that the sort of thing? Is that where we're headed? I mean, is that something that's going to be widespread? Not just the microscope, but that sort of idea in the future?
Well, I think that's a great example of a new device, a new technology that allowed us to the study that you're talking about. Their purpose of setting that up was that they wanted to be able to collect data at remote locations and get where there were few resources, like say the site of a flood, and get that data back to the research laboratory where there are more resources to compute it, to analyze it, make decisions about it, and technology allowed that to happen. And it's part of it is the access of the data and being able to communicate it, but it's also being able to make sure only the right people have access to it along the way. So the security of it, protecting it, transferring it, et cetera.
Well, let's talk security because I guess we can jump to maybe electronic medical records at this point. There's a lot of concern, and there's been a couple things in the news recently where things have been breached, patient data has been taken and stolen and hacked and lost. Is that a legitimate concern? I mean, is that something we're going to have to worry about the more we use data in this way, or is that just part of the learning curve and 10 years from now it'll be much better?
Well, I'd say always security is a concern with any data. If it's financial data, if it's at the university, if it's student data, privacy data, and health medical records data. There are professionals at every major organization whose sole job is to consider what are the best ways to keep our data secure. And I think we get better at it, and there's constantly an evolution of down to software tools that are helping us do it, down to the actual hardware is being designed to make sure that the process are running when they're looking at more secure ways to do it to protect the data.
And now we can talk about pejoratively called Obamacare, but the Affordable Care Act has done a ton of different things. But one thing it did, and I want to get this right, the Department of Health and Human Services formed the Office of Health Information Technology, which does exactly this. And their goal has been this widespread adoption of electronic health records and medical data in this way within 10 years. Is that realistic? I mean, will we see doctors turning to that, or is it going to be the old traditional chart with a pen?
I think you can say that making that goal, there are challenges and opportunities in healthcare moving in that direction. For instance, it's not just the implementing the new technology. You have to train people in how to use the new technology. You have to think about the way we manage data differently. And I think that's one of the reasons why in the professional science master's degree that the UNC Charlotte is offering in health informatics, they're really focusing on its project management, its being able to communicate better. It's not just the technological tools or the scientific aspects, but it's also being able to just think outside the box. How are we going to integrate this? How are we going to react to these challenges?
Well, real briefly, something that interests me about that, we're teaching the next generation to do that, and we have digital natives growing up who are used to this. Do doctors, do medical professionals now, are they being able to change over to that, or is there some resistance?
Well, I think anytime with new technologies, it doesn't happen overnight, you know, and so I think you have more electronic records than you've had before, but it's not something where a new process comes in. I think there's still a lot of paper records out there, and I think that's one of the reasons why you see these ideas of saying we're going to get here by a certain date.
And it's a matter of time. It's a matter of innovation.
But we're certainly when we're training people, we're looking with the future in mind. That look, electronic medical records are going to be here, and so that's one of the reasons for the collaboration between the College of Computing and Informatics and the College of Health and Human Services to create this master's, which starts this fall, is to think about, okay, how do we prepare people to work in this world? You know, how do we prepare people to build it to the challenges of bringing that about?
Fascinating stuff. Dr. Howden, let's move to you. I want to talk about maybe the research application of some of this data. All this data storage, all this stuff that we're talking about, you're using this in your research. Lay out your research for us first, because you're studying mice, but it's kind of interesting. How have you used this?
So I guess the first thing to say is why mice? And the reason we use mice for studying human disease is because of the wide range of genetic tools available to us, and they allow us to do certain experiments that we can't do in humans. So really what we try and do is identify genes or groups of genes using mice and then try and translate that to the human condition. And in terms of technology, what I use radiotelemetry to send an ECG signal, so it's electrical activity of the heart, without the mouse knowing what's going on. So the mouse is conscious, freely moving, and prior to that technology becoming available, we would have to anesthetize the mouse and attach ECG electrodes to it. And of course, we can't do that for very long. I'm now doing continuous studies for 4 or 5 days at a time, recording ECG continuously throughout that time.
And we're talking about a lot of data then. I mean, how might this be applicable to human beings? Has the transition been made yet, or is that something that still needs to come?
Well, in terms of what we're trying to figure out, so we published a paper late last year, where it seems like in certain patient populations, for example, heart rate responses to treatment might be predictive of some other poor prognosis. And so in using this technology, we can then translate that and use existing technology in human treatment in a different way.
Now, and we talked about privacy and security issues with Dr. Moore a second ago, but do you see any of that? I mean, maybe no one wants to hack into data on mice, but I mean, is that a potential thing to happen with humans? Are there precautions that you take to prevent that?
Not in terms of the mouse work, but I think, I take your point about genetic information and people. What did take 10 years and billions of dollars, the Human Genome Project, can now be done in 10 days and cost $10,000. And so maybe in a few years' time, you go to your doctor's office and they'll sequence your genome while you wait. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's coming at some point. But so there could be really important information gained from that. But also there could be information that you might not want to know about yourself. And who gets to decide? Well, only you can decide that.
Yeah.
And who do we allow to know that information and who not?
And the last thing, and this may be more of a theoretical question, maybe I'll open it up to the panel in the second part, but is there ever a point where you have too much data and too much information? I mean, people call medicine an art and a science, and I guess that's debatable, but is there ever a point where a doctor might know too much about a patient?
I don't know about knowing too much. I think it depends on how you organize the information. So at traditional medicine, a patient will go with symptoms and the doctor will have a certain protocol to follow, and there's going to be an element of trial and error there. With genetic information, the doctor can then formulate a treatment plan that's specific to that one patient. So I think as long as you organize the information in a practical way, it can be really useful.
And technology is a tool, and it depends how we use that tool. Is that
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, well, technology is critical to gathering that information in the first place.
All right. Well, Dr. Cornelius, I'm interested in your research, maybe only because, like Josh here, I'm on my cell phone all the time. And so I see the application for this sometimes. But you studied a mass text messaging program to look at HIV prevention and cell phone-based HIV prevention. What were you looking for? I mean, how did this study come about, and what were you seeking to do?
Well, what we were seeking to do was look at the feasibility and acceptability of this approach. Could we send safer sex message to adolescents? Would they respond? So in other words, we didn't want to turn them off. So we conducted focus groups to find out how many messages. Now, formulating this study, thinking ahead, I wanted to send 10 messages per day. But then we talked to the teens, and they said, if you send us 10 messages per day, we're just going to shut down the telephone.
Yeah.
So we decided, based on their feedback, to deliver 1 message per day. So what it was, they gave us consent, and they participated in the Becoming a Responsible Teen project. They attended 7 weekly face-to-face sessions, and then we sent 1 message per day for 90 days. It was the content of the curriculum to reinforce the information. We found the teens did respond to us. We had like 90 to 100% response rate.
Wow.
During that time period. We were able to retain the 36 teens for that 3 months, which tends to be a crucial time. You will lose participants in that time period, but we retained all of our teens. Now, they were given an incentive to participate, but you give incentives in a lot of research to keep people in.
Yeah.
But we were, and the teens were very positive with the response. Now, the text messages were not just a text message. We did embed pictures and videos in them, and they liked that. We had to keep them focused. It had to be content that they could understand, they could comprehend, and they did.
And you know, researchers, you in the scientific field, marketers in business fields, I'm going to talk to Josh about this in the business field in a second, but various people have correctly identified that mobile is the next frontier in a lot of different ways. Are we at the critical mass of people yet, from a healthcare perspective, from a research perspective, that mobile technology can impact enough people doing things like this, or does the digital divide still hold, and do we still have too big of a mass of people who aren't using phones like that?
No, the digital divide is not there any longer. We found that even with our teens, they were using the phones to access the internet. A lot of them, because they weren't using the home computers any longer. They were using their cell phones.
Yeah.
And so we're finding that this is what's happening. It's no longer that digital divide.
Well, and what about the future? What does the future in mobile healthcare look like? I mean, I think self-efficacy when I think of this, and I think about people being able to maybe take a mobile app and get their blood pressure read, or do follow some fitness things. Is that the next step?
No, that is the step now. I went to a mobile health summit in D.C. It was sponsored by the National Institutes of Health. You should see the technology, how you can send information to the physician from the paramedics to show a person's heart rhythm before he gets there so the doctor can diagnose if they're having a heart attack. But one thing when we talk about this in the civilian sector, the military has always had some type of mobile technology with healthcare. Our soldiers have been at war. They've been able to relay information back. It's just more or less getting into the civilian sector that we're seeing the implications and the long-range impact of this.
How far away are we from that? From truly making difference for millions of people? Couple years, couple months?
I say a couple of years because of the fact NIH is actually pushing the mobile health initiative. And this is the wave of the future now.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming. When I went to the meeting and I came back, I was like, whoa, the things that they're doing, it's just overwhelming. The knowledge that they can obtain from patients from remote areas.
And I feel much more superficial about using it for Twitter. Well, Josh, let's go to you now, because I'm interested in the business side of things. And I don't want to say research doesn't have practical applications, because it does, but the business application is a little bit different. We've been talking trends and health and all sorts of things, but what about Charlotte? I mean, are there things in the digital realm going on in healthcare in Charlotte right now that are worth noting, or are we still kind of behind the curve as far as it goes nationally?
Well, I think all the doctors on this panel would certainly attest that the universities around town, which the Charlotte region certainly has a lot of higher education institutions, and specifically in the health field, you are seeing those developments come out of here. These are the guys with the money and with the resources and with the manpower to actually put some time into making leveraging sort of these platforms that we already have.
Yeah. And anything local on your radar that's worth noting? I mean, we talk about mobile apps.
Yeah.
We look at things like all these Nike apps, these Fitment. Are
Yeah.
there things like that being done locally, or is there not a demand for it yet here?
Well, there's certainly your fitness buffs here are using. There's tons of apps. There's some great apps out there, none of them that were produced in Charlotte, but there's some great apps for monitoring your heart rate or even your sleep patterns and stuff like that. And certainly there's people using that stuff. Is Charlotte as a whole building that stuff? I wouldn't say that we're known for developing those kinds of applications.
Is there a reason for that, or is there just not a demand?
Well, it's funny. Charlotte is a great town for sort of intellectual development. There are wonderful startups in here. There are lots of smart programmers. I don't know that the health field is necessarily sort of their purview right now.
Well, talk about that market, the tech market for startups. We think about San Francisco and Silicon
certainly
Valley.
do.
Are we, I know we're not at that level, but are we doing a good job cultivating technology as a whole here?
Well, it's funny because the tech sector is already here. Let me give you one example, Bobby. If you took all the programmers out of Bank of America, just took them out, made a new company, they would be the 10th largest technology company in the world.
Oh, wow.
The likes of IBM, Google, Facebook, Apple. So we already have that install base of programmers here. What we do a poor job at, and this is something that we try to talk to the mayor and some of the city partners about, is making sure that other cities know that technology professionals are here and that this is a town where you can find lots of smart people.
Well, and what needs to happen to make it a better technology town? Is it just a matter of maybe outreach to let people know we have this? Or is it an education component? Is it a promoting a better business arena, a better entrepreneurial development area? I mean, what needs to make it better?
I think it's really about external marketing of the city. Right now, when the city leaders, they go around and they talk about healthcare, they talk about finance, of course, they talk about energy, but a lot of those are things that every city sort of in America or North America is trying to, put their hat around.
Yeah.
And the tech sector, since it's already here and since you already have all these smart people, it's just really one spot of the city that doesn't get a huge spotlight.
And I've got to ask you, should I buy Facebook and LinkedIn stock, or are we going to see I mean, we saw the dot-com bubble burst.
Yeah.
Are we going to see the tech bubble burst?
Well, some of the larger ones might be good bets, but that's a fair question because a lot of what's happening in Silicon Valley right now is pure speculation. That town long ago became more of a casino than people interested in actually developing businesses that have a long lifespan. So, fair question.
So stick with the big ones.
Stick with the big ones for now, but not Groupon.
No, not Groupon. We'll talk about that when we get back. And actually, when we get back, we're going to kind of wrap up a big panel segment with everybody to talk about implications and what all this stuff means for the future and how we might apply it in the real world. So stick with us. First, though, we head out to Evolution Fitness, Yoga, and Martial Arts in South End to do a little fitness stuff. Stay tuned for that. I'm out at Evolution Yoga, Fitness, and Martial Arts here in Charlotte's historic South End, and I'm talking with Jeremy, who is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which means he's a pretty scary guy. And we're talking about aggression today. We've talked about some offensive moves, some technical stuff about Jiu-Jitsu. So Jeremy, run me through first. Jiu-Jitsu is very technical, but anybody can do it, right?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people get caught up in thinking that they have to be an athlete or be a natural or be into fighting to have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the gentle art, and it's for everybody. All you got to do is come to class and try it out.
And there are classes here at Evolution. There's a lot, not too many classes in the Charlotte area, but when you go to your first class, if I were to come to a class next week, what am I looking at? What can I expect?
Try to wear something comfortable that, it isn't going to get caught in the way, something that breathes, that you're going to be able to sweat in, and just bring a lot of water and come to class. It's a good workout, but the hardest part is getting in your car and coming through the door.
And you're not going to put me in the ring with somebody who's a black belt, are you?
No, of course not. I get on the mat and I'll personally train with people, but my goal is to teach you, not to beat you up. If you wanted to be a professional fighter, there's routes to do that, but I understand that I have to cater it for everyone's needs. And if you are a casual person that wants to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because you love the art, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to rip your arms off or choke you unconscious.
And they don't use it just for professional fighting. People here use it for weight loss, physical fitness, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, weight loss, self-discipline, also self-efficacy, the way that you feel about yourself. It can really improve a lot of those characteristics. Jiu-Jitsu is a lifestyle. There's a lot of things that can go into it.
We're not here to talk about weight loss. We're here to show some moves.
Yes,
so
sir.
We're talking about aggression today. A couple aggressive moves, a couple submission moves.
Yes, sir.
Run us through it.
All right, sir. Mr. Pacheco, will you lay down for me? Mount. All right, so I've done some things right, and I get Mr. Pacheco on the ground. Jiu-Jitsu is mostly about submissions. People love submissions. It's exciting, and I'm going to show you just some of the really basic ones today. Of course, don't try these without good supervision, and always if you are in a position like this, I would recommend tapping if it hurts, okay? So, one hand on the wrist, one hand on the elbow. We're going to push that forearm to the floor. One of the things that people get caught up in is they really try to use their arms. We're going to use our whole core, our whole body. We're going to push that arm to the floor. Now we're going to frame out the head. You notice that my elbow comes in and creates a nice frame so that he can't bring this arm in. My other hand is going to come underneath, control, and normally I would put my head down right here, but I want you to be able to hear and see what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep it nice and visible here. I'm going to bring my elbow to my knee, and then very slightly I'm going to drift my knee up to my hip. It doesn't have to be a fast and explosive movement. You should never really rip anything off. Be slow and technical and you will have the same results. Let's take a look at it again one more time. Again, elbow and wrist. I'm going to frame, put that elbow down. Make sure you have good bone support. Notice I'm not using my thumb here. Underneath the elbow, control. Again, my head would normally stay down. I'm going to pull my elbow back to my knee, and then very slowly, turn for me, very slowly I'm going to bring my elbow all the way up to my hip. If you do this correctly, there's no way that your elbow should get anywhere close to your hip. Underneath, in, nice and tight, and drag up. Very easy technique. Let's take a look at one more other technique. I've done some other things correct. You might have seen this in WWE, you might have seen it in the UFC. I've gotten on Mr. Pacheco's back and I've got good control. I'm gonna pull him back into that pocket, have nice tight control. My hand is gonna zip underneath that chin and I have nice and tight control. This head has a very important job. He might start to defend if I don't keep my head in, so don't leave a bunch of space. From here, my other hand, my free hand's gonna come out and I'm going to control my bicep. At this point, my hand's going to travel behind the head, and now I've got a good tight position. I'm going to tighten everything down and tap right here. One of the things that people get caught up in, they get here and they stretch their body. You might have seen that in the UFC. It's counterintuitive, guys. We don't want to stretch that out. We want to compress that. So your elbow and your forearm and your bicep, everything should be pushing down on the middle of that chest. So when we come in here, I don't want to see a pulling motion. I want to see a pushing motion. It should be very intense, but there shouldn't be any pain involved. One more time from scratch, let's turn angles. I've got good control. I'm controlling in the back here. My hand, I make a little spear underneath the neck. I control. My head is in nice and tight. My hand comes out. I come on my bicep behind the head. And now remember, we're pushing forward with everything. We're not stretching back. So I'm here. And I stretch forward, nice and easy. Again, I recommend you don't try these at home without proper supervision, but this is a little bit of a breakdown that may be something that you've seen on an MMA and the UFC and you don't understand exactly what's going on. Now you know.
Fascinating stuff. A little scary, but always safety first here at Evolution Fitness, Yoga, and Martial Arts in Charlotte's South End. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to A Healthier Charlotte and our discussion on healthcare, technology, and digital media. And let's bring this all back together and frame this digital media and this mobile technology and all this sort of stuff kind of with a discussion on implications. We know how common social media is and mobile technology, and we obviously have instances of amazing research that's very soon to be applicable if it's not already. What does it all mean? I mean, Dr. Moore, first, is it good that we are more connected than ever? I mean, is it always good to be uber connected, make the world smaller, or are there drawbacks to having so much technology at our fingertips?
I think it's probably hard to put it in a black and white perspective. I could say there's benefits of being connected. For instance, being able, let's say, if I wanted to go running with a group of people, I can go online and find a group that is running within 5 miles of where I was thinking about, and that's someone that's going to set the pace with me, or I can track my diet habits or things like that with colleagues, et cetera. So there's ways that you can leverage technology to be more, being connected can be healthy. I think always having your eyes on your cell phone, there's probably, some drawbacks to that in terms of, personal communication. But I'm guilty of that as much as anybody.
And we see internet addiction and stuff like that. I mean, obviously that's a case in the minority, but Josh, I mean, am I crazy for wanting to devote an entire show to this? Because somebody will say this and say, yeah, we know technology's good, stuff will get better, we keep innovating. Is it as simple as that, or do we need to be looking deeper into how technology affects us?
Well, I think whether or not we decide that technology is bad, it's sort of intractably linked to our consumerism. Excuse me.
It's being called right now.
And
Good.
it's sort of like intractably linked from our social fabric. So even if we were like, this is horrible, we have to get rid of it, it's kind of too late.
Yeah. Any other thoughts like that? Are there any concerns on the radar from the academic perspective about the damage maybe that technology is doing to us in any way?
Well, I mean, I think there are situations where, you could use technology to communicate with. So I could use technology to communicate with students in my lab, but that's no substitute really for being in the lab. So they can say, hey, look what I found, or do it this way, or, sometimes, even though that may involve some technology, but, face-to-face interaction, I think there's no substitute for that.
There's still a component of boots on the ground actually being there and doing the work.
Absolutely.
Dr. Cornelius, culturally speaking, and I think you look at this with kids when we talk about text messaging, are we too wired in? I mean, are there too many things vying for our attention? You mentioned you wanted to send 10 messages a day to somebody who's older. That might sound like a ton. To a younger person, they send thousands of messages a day in some cases. I mean, are we too overconnected?
I don't believe we are. And just to talk about, to add further into something you discussed before, we developed a project website, and we started looking at the counter. So we had 1 month, like 2,000 hits to our website. So we decided to do a web analysis and found that we had unique visitors to 61 different countries to view the information about our project on the website. So when we're talking about Charlotte and the local implications and so forth, whatever is happening here, people are watching us internationally. So we were amazed when we found that information.
I think that's a great point. And what about the power of the individual? And Josh, maybe this is for you because you're working a lot with mobile apps and mobile development. More than just social media, but we are all individually able to effectively become our own communication networks and our own media organizations. What are the ramifications of that going forward? I mean, that's immeasurable power.
Well, I'll say this, I'm 30, right? I'm so glad that Facebook was not around when I was in high school. I think that it's really, really hard. Like, things have developed so fast that really kids really sort of need some rules around.
Yeah.
To think about when someone searches for you on Google 50 years from now. Do you want something from when you were 15 showing up? I wouldn't.
I don't. I mean, that's a good point. And what about in the healthcare realm? I mean, we can talk about taking our communication and our networks into our hands, but Dr. Moore, in healthcare, are we taking our health into our hands with this? I mean, is that where this is going in terms of the power of the individual in health?
Well, I think you certainly have more capability to track your own health data. So one of the things you and I know we talked about you mentioned you can do blood pressure, test your blood pressure to your cell phone and then collect that data. You could then share that data with your doctor and your dentist, just to kind of give everyone across the board, like, this is a better picture of my healthcare, of my state of affairs. And so I think that's a part of it, is being able to leverage the technology just to really track yourself, to be more aware of your own health.
I think there may also, there may also be some issues there, and I think that's great. So, for example, if you had a device that, indicated that you were going to have a heart attack in 10 minutes or something, then you could get to the hospital and do something about it. But one of the classes I teach, a graduate class, in sort of techniques in doing things like measuring blood pressure, and we have to be quite careful about, blood pressure is not a number. It's something that changes all the time. And so, if you're sending data to your doctor might ask, well, what are the circumstances and is this meaningful? And so I think we have to be a little bit careful in that regard about what we do with it. The other thing that something that we, again, have to be careful with is, if you're not feeling very well, you could maybe type in your symptoms into Google, or type in symptoms of some random disease, and I bet some of them match up.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have that disease.
Yeah.
So again, self-diagnosis is perhaps a danger here that we ought to avoid, which we can do through education, of course.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have a question. When I go to the doctor, let's say I go to my primary care doctor, right? And I get home and I forgot to ask a question. How come I can't send them an email yet?
Well, we allowed our teams to do that in the project. And because I'm a registered nurse. The students that were involved are registered nurses, health educators. They were able to text. People are texting their doctors now.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just
okay.
establishing
Really?
those
So I
relationships.
need a new doctor is what you're
Yeah.
telling
No,
me.
that's not necessarily. But I know I get text. I like text my dentist and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm missing out.
Where are we headed? I mean, I'll kind of open up to the group here for the last minute. Where 10 or 20 or 30 years, and maybe you can hold your answer and invest some money somewhere. But where is this headed? Where's the future going in healthcare? What's the next maybe final frontier?
Well, I can see people getting diagnoses earlier. For example, in England, they developed an app where you can put a urine specimen on it, plug it in, as a USB port into your smartphone, and it would diagnose if you have a sexually transmitted disease or
Wow.
not. So that's where we're going. And as far as Europe and other countries, they're ahead of us in the U.S. as far as the technology and where we are with healthcare. And if we read the research, the literature, Australia, they've been sending text messages to kids about safer sex prevention way before we started doing anything with this.
We do know that there are a lot of sensors that you can plug into phones that are being developed right now, specifically for all these purposes. You guys mentioned blood pressure or STDs or certainly like insulin levels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Fascinating stuff.
I think one thing that it's Moore's law, the
Right.
Gordon Moore, who said that
No
that-
relation. Not me.
you know, that processing power will double every 2
Yes.
years or something. So I think that it's hard to imagine actually in 10 or 20 years time what will be possible, you know, so it's hard to speculate.
Well, one thing, they don't call them smartphones for a reason. They're
nothing.
smart, okay? They're smarter. I have a smartphone.
Yeah.
It's smarter than me. So, I mean, just what's involved with it.
And that's the thing, just faster, smaller, cheaper. You know, the processing power that you have in your, PC now, you'll have in your phone, and so it just doubles, every year. So.
Yeah, it does.
Fascinating stuff. Well, thank you guys. We'll have to see if those predictions come true, but really, really interesting stuff on where healthcare is going. So appreciate you all joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having
Bobby.
us.
And that's all we've got. That's all the time we've got on A Healthier Charlotte. Remember, go to ahealthiercharlotte.com for all your local health and wellness information, and maybe we'll start putting a mobile app up. For our guests today and for our crew on set here, I want to thank you all for tuning in to A Healthier Charlotte. I'm Bobby DeMuro, and this has been A Healthier Charlotte.